Happy Wednesday. This is Atlas Wednesday Lens Day. I'm Dan. I'm a recovering cinematographer, and that is why I'm part of the amazing team here at Atlas Lens Co, bringing the world of cinematography to your hands. But through cinematography, through storytelling, we hope to empower and enlighten people. So at the beginning of it, this is all a people business. So has anyone ever heard of the Lascaux Caves in France? Anthropologists went to these caves and they looked on the walls and they saw these beautiful cave pictographs, and they'd see some bison, some people with spears. But the weird thing about these pictures is that all of them had 4 sets of legs, 4 sets of arms, and they looked kind of wavy. And so a lot of people for a long time thought, hey, maybe these people in France in the ancient times, prehistoric times, were tripping on mushrooms, and that's why all the pictures on the cave walls were wavy. But it wasn't until someone walked into the cave with a flickering torch and the images on the wall began to dance that people realized motion pictures have been with us for much longer than we think. And so really that's why we're here today, is because we want to carry the tradition of storytelling and humanity through technology into the future for a better future for all people around the world. So that's what the mission of Atlas is, and we do it through our anamorphic lenses. You know, I know some of you aren't directors, some of you aren't cinematographers, but one of the things that cinematographers and directors who are an essential part of making movies and telling stories like to do, and I absolutely suggest that they do it. And by the way, this is applicable even if you're not a cinematographer or a director, but they like to test things. So we, every Wednesday, like to invite people here into Atlas to test and try out our lenses. You can test other people's lenses. You can test any camera with your lens. And so we have some fantastic guests, including my good friend Jay from Sony here. And he's got the new Sony FX2, which you'll be able to test. So we're gonna have a variety of different cameras. You know, we're pretty camera agnostic. So we've got stuff from Blackmagic Design. We've got stuff from Red. We have stuff from Ari, and we have stuff from Canon. And of course, we have amazing stuff from Sony, like the new FX2. And the cool thing is we suggest you test, because one camera and one lens for one job might be the right thing. And for a different job or a different kind of storytelling, you might want to try something completely different. And the only way to know, you know, you could have conjecture, you could talk about it, somebody could tell you this one's the best, somebody could say that's the best, but really where the rubber meets the road is testing. And so that's part of what Wednesday Lens Day is all about. So the main thing we're going to do today is test some lenses, see how you can make beautiful images, or, you know, if you want to make images that tell your story differently, how you might do that. And an important part of that is being able to share those images. So we have a couple different cameras up here. We have a Blackmagic Design Ursa Cine 12K LF, which is a full frame, full height 3x2 aspect ratio sensor. And we have one of our Orion series 80mm anamorphic lenses on it. And then over here, we have a Red Raptor XXL, which is the state of the art in terms of the Red ecosystem. It has built-in ND filters. It has a global shutter. And so between these two cameras, you have two very high technology cameras that do beautiful work and will, you know, help you deliver the results you're looking for. But let's say that you're working with a picky director who's not sure, and you're the cinematographer and you want to shoot some tests and share them over to that person to take a look and see what they think and get their opinion. We're going to showcase how you can record those test clips and then share them via the Strada ecosystem. Maybe you're so enraptured with a story that you don't even notice what the lens is doing. And I think that's the magic of what cinema is supposed to do, is bring you into a world. And that's why I love anamorphic lenses, because it brings you into a world. You leave the real world behind and you enter the world of cinema. And so your mind transpires into this dream world that you get to exist outside of the real, but somewhere between the real and the ethereal. But that is a very high-minded concept. So I think we have to bring it back down to earth for a moment and say, first of all, we have to explain what an anamorphic lens is. So an anamorphic lens is a lens that intentionally, optically distorts the image to fit a panoramic picture onto a square piece of film. So you could say it's a codec. It's an optical mechanical codec. It's compressing a panoramic image onto a square sensor or square piece of film. And that's the original purpose of an anamorphic lens. It's to give you a panorama with a square recording format. And then when you go back to the cinema and project it back out, it's the decompression side of the codec where it decompresses back out onto the cinema screen. And I could give you another 2 hours talking about why that's important, and I will answer anything about that offline, but to get into the specifics about why we like it, nowadays it has almost nothing to do with those codec aspects. It has more to do with the artifacts of the lens. So did anybody see the Oscar award-winning film Anora? Love Sean Baker's films, love Anora. Anora used Atlas Orion series lenses along with some amazing vintage Lomo anamorphic lenses. And Lomo anamorphics are a former Soviet manufacturer that was part of the state-run movie-making organization there. And so it's interesting to see this is technology that was created by the state in order to propagate cultural information. And so you could say these are sort of two cultural ideologies, but they're using the same mechanism to disseminate that information in an entertaining and visually stimulating way. So why do we use anamorphic lenses today? It's because of the visual aesthetic qualities, and this is sort of art history stuff. What is it about the image that brings us into the movie? I'm predicting that probably in about 40 or 50 years, there's going to be people who are saying, we need that old brain rot look. Have you ever seen this vintage Skibbity toilet with a vertical video? You know, we're in a spatial video now where it's like the video is directly coming into your brain, but they're going to want to say, well, we got to throw it back to that 50-year-old technology with the Skibbity guy. And I think that will be interesting to see if that happens. So let's place our bets now. I mean, I think we should write whether we think that's going to happen, put it in a time capsule and bury it, and then we can unearth it later and see if we were right or wrong. And, you know, there was a famous saying from Brian Eno. He's a music producer and musician himself. And Brian Eno said, it's the artifacts of the recording media of the previous generation, the failures of those media, that become the sought-after characteristics of the next artist. So that's a little more fun, more recent contemporary art history for us to think about. But what we're looking at today is, and I can point out some of these characteristics briefly on this nice, beautiful OLED monitor. You see the panoramic image that we have, and that's being created partially through the recording format, which is square, being compressed with the wide-angle anamorphic lens. You see the out of focus area behind her is becoming oval shaped. And in particular, these lights back in the distance are becoming stretched ovularly. And that's because the entrance pupil of the lens itself is distorting the image in order to compress the light rays through it. And so that out of focus area becomes characteristically enlarged because it's in the out of focus area. So disproportionate to where the image plane is. It's actually astigmatic. So it's not focusing in the same form vertically as it is horizontally. I'll hop on the camera and pan over, but another characteristic of anamorphic lenses is that the sides and top and bottom of the image might have a little bit less sharpness. So I'll hop on the camera and tilt down. What we're doing is we're creating this clip, and as I throw it out of focus, you'll see the way the bokeh stretches in the background there. And you get those dazzling oval bokeh, right? And then if I pan onto the light, you'll see that there's a flare. And if I look directly at the light source there, you can see that there's a little blue line, right? Anybody see J.J. Abrams' Star Trek? That's a pretty familiar movie that you might recognize some of that kind of flare characteristic from. Now, that's an artifact that has to do with the optical elements in the lens that are, again, stretching that wide angle field of view and condensing it onto the square piece of film or square sensor and bouncing around in there. So flares, you know, I've got a great website if you like flares and learning more about them, cinelensflares.com. That's from Marcus Forder, ASC BVK, and it is an absolute treasure trove of information. So we should probably also talk to him about how his system could be backed up and distributed through Strada. but you can see that flare, you can see the sharpness. And then if I put her all the way over on the left, you know, an Orion is a pretty well corrected image in terms of field flatness. But if I grab a Mercury lens a little bit later, we could do a comparison between an 80mm Mercury and a 72mm Orion, and then you'd be able to see the field curvature that exists a little bit more so in the Mercury. So we'd be able to do a quick comparison. So both of these are anamorphic lenses, the Mercury and the Orion. The Orion series are a traditional 2x anamorphic. So in the 1950s, some of the very first widely adopted anamorphic lenses used a 2x anamorphic squeeze. So you'd get twice as wide of a field of view. And there have been many subsequent formats, including Atlas Mercury, which uses a 1.5 squeeze. So you get a 1.5 times wider field of view. We've got this awesome red Raptor camera, and we've got the 65mm Orion here. And you'll see we still have that really nice oval bokeh, you know, highlights. You get a little bit of a wash here from the window, but not too much. So it's not washing out the image and making it completely foggy or neutralized. That's an important thing to look for if you're shooting against windows in a house, for instance, in a practical set, in a real location. And then I'll pan over and we can look at that lamp that was pointed at us for the flare and see just sort of how the flare color looks on this camera body compared to that camera body. So the color of the flares from the lenses should match, but this is just using the default color space and color transform in the LUT of each individual camera body. And so that's going to give you sort of nuanced qualities between the different lenses in terms of color and otherwise.
Dan, I'll tell you one thing I did on that camera. That's running a Codec 5219 LUT simulation. So the saturation point is way lower. It's going to have less magenta bias overall. And so that's why it looks as dramatically different. It's 5219.
I really like the cyan color of the flare too. It's more cyan rather than a magenta, like you said. So that's really cool to see. And this is a great case for testing. So these are great notes. So not only is it great to have visual reference for what you're looking at, but to have auditory reference or, you know, paper notes. But of course, you know, as we move into a more modern and automated era, having more metadata is always better. So I would say that's one of my feature requests for the future is from a physical slate, being able to transpose data into metadata would be pretty neat. So we've got a nice short little clip here. I racked focus to show the way the lens breathes. You know, breathing is just sort of a change of magnification as you focus. So you'll notice that as I focus closer, more items come into the frame, but just slightly. We call that operator-centric breathing. So the idea is if you're trying to catch up to someone on a pan, that as you're focusing closer, you don't have to pan faster in order to keep them in frame. So if you're tracking something and they're moving, you can actually have a little bit of an advantage in terms of focus and movement there. So I'm gonna go ahead and cut this one. Would you mind walking right up to the lens? Just take a step towards us to about putting your feet here. So I'm also gonna showcase the close focus ability of the lens. Yeah, come on in just a hair, lean in just a little bit, and then lean back out. Audrey, lean out, lean out, lean out. And a little more, just a hair back, perfect. So that's minimum focus on the 65mm Orion. And you could see just how awesome that looks. So I'm gonna go ahead and cut that. And then I'll have you do the same here, and then we'll do the lens swap. Awesome. So that's essentially the minimum focus distance for the 80mm Orion. Here we go. Awesome. I'm gonna go ahead and cut camera and then switch these lenses. And while I'm changing the lenses, what makes a good anamorphic lens? This is a highly subjective discussion, but I can tell you what I think makes a good anamorphic lens. But this is also the beauty of testing. So testing will tell you what kind of tools you might want creatively for your project. So for me, what makes a good anamorphic lens is something that is very usable in the sense that there are not a ton of compromises in order to make it functional for your day-to-day operations. So what do I mean by that? If you have a lens that is from 1972 and it might have the most beautiful vintage characteristics where there's a ton of fall off on the edges, and you have these beautiful flares that come through and everything is, the Japanese call it wabi-sabi, which means perfectly imperfect. So that is generally the characteristics I like in an anamorphic lens. It's a balance of striving for perfection, but you always come up short because you're essentially forcing light rays to do things that they were never meant to do. So that's sort of the inevitable challenge, right, with any kind of lens, is there's a balance, there's a tension that exists in between what someone might consider perfection and what is considered achievable possibility or reality, right? And I think we meet the same kind of rigor every day in a film set. So you can think of a script for a movie as a blueprint. The blueprint is an idealized, perfect Mount Olympus idea of what something should be. So you have this perfect blueprint, and then you go to manufacture it or make it, and you're met with all the challenges of the real world. So your script may say, it's a sunny day, and the person is driving down the road in their sports car. But when we get to the set, it actually turns out that it's partially cloudy, and the transportation department couldn't get the sports car that was supposed to be in the movie, so you have a Toyota Corolla. Can you make the movie still? Absolutely. Should you make the movie still? It depends on the budget, and it depends on how much time you have and what your constraints are. So this is the tension that will always exist between the perfect and the imperfect. So there's only one way forward. If you believe in going forward and upward, you have to push forward. You have to make the most of what you have. And the same is true with technology. So we can dream of a perfect technology where we wake up and the artificial intelligence robot makes us scrambled eggs and breakfast and hot cocoa. And we all want that idea, right? We want all this wonderful stuff to happen, but then reality gets in the way and you don't quite get there. So what is it that we can do? All we can do is the best that we can do. And really that's the ethos at Atlas, is to design something perfect, but acknowledge the perfections that we want and infuse them in. And so what we're doing here is trying to make lenses that represent all of the image quality of a 1960s or 1970s lens, which were the types of lenses used to make many of my favorite movies. Movies like Punch Drunk Love, Raiders of the Lost Ark, movies like Close Encounters of the Third Kind, Blade Runner. These are all movies that were made with anamorphic lenses, and the lens enhances the storytelling. All of these movies have very different themes, very different image qualities to them, but the one thing that they all share is that they've used anamorphic lenses to help tell their story. And so I look at them as role models. How can we become the best part of our role models and drop off the things about our role models that don't serve us and don't serve a best possible future for all people? And that is really my daily mantra, and I think our daily mantra here at the company. How do we make the best possible future for storytellers, for cinematography, and do it through great lenses and having fun and being active and invested and engaged in the future of storytelling? So you can see the out of focus shapes are larger, rounder ovals here. You can see that the lens has a little bit more of a golden color quality to it. And the flare here, if I focus in on that lamp, we'll get a golden amber streak right through the frame there. And I'll pan over so you could see sort of the way the off-axis flare looks too. And I'll make sure she's in focus. There we go. And you can see the off-axis flare popping in from the side there. And if I could ask you to take a step up, and I'll follow focus into you as you walk towards me. And if you could back up just a hair, a little more, and there we go. So that's minimum focus on the 72 here. and you can see that really this has a really nice control of chromatic aberration. So there's not much CA where the edges of the out of focus area have color fringing to them, right? Or any of this chrome. If we look at any of the shiny objects here, there's not like a green or magenta shift as we rack through. And then we'll go ahead and switch over to the red Raptor. And thank you, team, for making sure that the camera is set up correctly here. So I'll start at minimum focus, and we didn't quite have the 54 millimeter, which would be a little bit closer in focal length yet, but we threw the 42, which is the first lens in the Mercury series that we made. So one of the characteristics you can see, and I'll roll this, is there's a little bit more distortion to this lens. So you can see that the outer edges of the lens, there's more of a warping, like a wraparound. That's called Petzval. And if you look at the vertical lines, they bow out. That's called barrel distortion. So I'll go ahead and rack focus to our talent here. And you can see there's not much wash from the outside either. So you're able to get a really nice clean without it being washed out. And you can see that flare peeking in. And so distortion in a lens, this type of barrel distortion, can actually be a visual tool or a visual cue to create more depth in a scene and create sort of a feeling of immersion in the proscenium. So it kind of brings the viewer more into the scene as if they're actually there. And this one has an incredibly close focus. So if you'd like to stand up and walk up to me about 2 feet away from the mark. And you can come in a little more, just a hair more, a little more. Very dynamic, perfect. So this is my favorite way to shoot an anamorphic lens, actually, right up close. I like to put the camera so close to the talent, and old anamorphic lenses back in the day didn't, for the most part, have close focus that's this close. So you would actually have to add a diopter, which is sort of like reading glasses for a lens, to the lens in order to be able to get a close-up like this. But with the Atlas Mercury series and with the Orion series, we actually have quite a bit enhanced close focus compared to many of the traditional vintage anamorphic lenses. So when we were talking about what makes a good anamorphic lens, and we were talking about the idea of usability, I would say that this is a very usability enhancing trait because it allows you to create a scene where people travel through the scene and then come right up to the camera without the challenge of having to add a diopter to the camera in a cut. So you have a much more dynamic and usable lens in terms of on-set performance in an environment where you have to react quickly, or you want to build sweeping movement where things change dynamically in the scene. So thank you so much for standing up, and if you want to pop back. And after this, what's great about this is that we have 2 clips, and actually, unbeknownst to everyone, we actually have a 3rd clip running back in the corner over there. So thank you so much, Jay, for bringing in the FX2, because we've been recording an actually entirely new and different format, which was fairly uncommon in the world of anamorphic lenses, where we've taken the camera body, rotated it 90 degrees, so you have a tall sensor. So does anybody ever watch any of the vertical content on Instagram, vertical video or TikTok? I think we all get sucked into it eventually, right? Or reel shorts. I know that's very popular right now for many. What we've created is a new way of bringing you multiple formats from one recording, which is an open source concept that is empowered by an Atlas anamorphic lens. You can use any PL mount anamorphic lens to do this, but we would prefer and hope that you choose an Atlas lens. And we can go into a deep dive about exactly how to do this, but basically you just want to rotate your camera body 90 degrees, install the anamorphic lens, and then with your external monitor, you're going to set an anamorphic D-squeeze ratio that is a fractional 1 over the ratio of the lens. So if you have a Mercury series lens, that would be 1 over 1.5, which gives you a 0.67 ratio. So you can set that ratio manually in the camera, in the monitor, not in the camera body. And that gives you monitoring, so you can preview this square or near square image. And from that master recording, you can then deliver a square directly to your client or to your project. You could deliver a 16:9 extraction for traditional TV or YouTube, and you can do a vertical extraction of 9:16. And so you're getting the most pixels, the most resolution, the most vive from an Atlas anamorphic lens. It gives you a new aesthetic that most people haven't seen before, which is that beautiful out of focus bokeh, those streak flares, but in a new format. So it's the same interesting characteristics and flaws, some might say, of an anamorphic lens, but in an entirely new box that gives you a new aesthetic possibility. You also get the opportunity to be creative. So you can use this box to put pictures in a new way that is inspiring, eye-opening, or reflective of the things you believe or that you want to believe or understand more. So it's a really interesting artistic possibility that allows for new creative possibilities, new flexibility, and new capabilities and techniques. So after that, we now have 3 cameras that have 3 different recording formats that we'll be able to put into the Strada system and share. And I'm about to let Michael take the stage and share with you how we could do that. So we've got the footage from the Cioni 12K LF, which is very unique in that it has an Ethernet port that allows you to connect directly to a computer and do file sharing right off the media that's in the camera. So that is interesting, and I think all cameras should have this because it just makes for much more flexibility in terms of getting your footage to post-production or to people who need to see it, who may be on or off the set much quicker. We have the amazing Red Raptor X XL, which we have traditional CFast cards that we can take out and connect to the computer and start downloading. And then we have the awesome Sony FX2, which I believe we recorded with an SD card, and we can take that SD card out and also start sharing it. And without further ado, I'd love to welcome Michael Cioni to the stage to tell us about Strada. Thank you so much, Michael. And I'll be here to be your human prop and your assistant.
Yeah, we might do a little more. Yeah, this is great. I mean, this was a really good example. And I think the question, I thought it was you, sir, that asked, like, what are we looking for in the difference? I think what Dan did is he explained a lot of the sort of high-level nuance that's in these images. Hopefully you can see that. But another way that I think is important for creative people to really understand is you could ask the same question and flip it upside down by way of saying, how do we have something distinct that makes us different than everyone else? Because as it gets easier and easier to make content and it gets more and more flooded with ways to consume it, we need new ways to rise to the top and give something different so people recognize that's a look. I had the pleasure of working on 3 films with the director David Fincher. And a lot of people that know David Fincher know that he has a look to his films, and we associate certain styles with that. Dan mentioned J.J. Abrams. He has a look to his films. I think it's Richardson responsible for a lot of that, but you know, there's a lot of those looks that are combined. And so I think it's imperative that we as creators understand that you have an opportunity, maybe an obligation, to establish your own look. That's why when we looked at this camera, I had loaded a lot that I built. This actually was built by a colorist at a company, Light Iron, named Ian Vertivec. And together we worked on the movie The Social Network and came up with a look for The Social Network that a lot of people liked. It has very little magenta in it because Mr. Fincher does not like that color. And it really celebrates teal and green. And it's low contrast. Fincher films aren't super high contrast, where a J.J. Abrams film is going to be very high contrast. Fincher films are low contrast. And so this particular LUT is actually a low contrast, very, very, in fact, if you come back up, Morgan, and if you stand closer and you let the light in the hallway catch your left cheek, If you could feel that, so turn your body a little to your left, a little less, come back to us right there. So if we see that, and let's roll this, Dan, it's beautiful. This is a low contrast look that is based on the Social Network and also based on the flavor of film Kodak 5219, which when Dan was referring to those 70s and 80s films, they all used it. It was a very common stock. And so this has color characteristics and film characteristics of that film stock. And then you add to that a little of the flavor of the Social Network, and you have a little Social Network feeling of this. And if we were to add a little bit of green bias to it in the color correction, it would feel like that film. And that's a unique look. And so the idea here is combining the optics to create something unique. And I think that's something that we might know on the surface. Yeah, I want to create a unique look. But how do you do that if everybody has access to the same stuff, right? And that's why anamorphic is, I think, one of the biggest differentiators. Because even if you cut this out in 16:9 and you got rid of the widescreen aspect ratio, I guarantee the people that saw it would feel something differently about it. Dan was talking very cleverly about how anamorphic was a compression and decompression hack to make to basically make a rectangle fit in a square. And we don't need that anymore. In fact, we now have rectangles the other direction, so it's kind of counterintuitive, which is why the FX2 hack is actually really nifty. B was saying, what did you call it, B? She called it
Atlas Scope 90.
Atlas Scope 90. There we go. So we got Atlas Scope 90. But what's really cool about whether or not you have the aspect ratio you want, you have the texture and nuance. And you can see all that in the way the bokeh falls off. In a simple close-up here that's just got a few lights that Shannon set up, and we've got this back rim light on Morgan's face, we're seeing something really unique. And if you want to do one more rack to that back and forth, Dan, we'll kind of exercise this quite a bit. And it really just, imagine a character in the background, something like that. This is the type of stuff that you can set up quickly with the right LUT, the right camera, and the right lens. You're just so much further along, I think, than a lot of products. And so I like the Atlas lineup because I think the Orions have sort of a classic result in an anamorphic feel, and the Mercuries are a little bit more of a modern, but the modern Mercury still has increased barrel distortion. If you remember, that barrel distortion actually makes it feel actually a little older, even though it's a more modern look overall. So you kind of get the best of both worlds here. I also think it's important to point out what Dan created in the Mercuries is remarkable in that they're small and they're light. And normally in anamorphic, you don't get to use those words to describe your lens set. And that's something that I think the creator really helped motivate and took advantage of, because they used FX3s with Mercuries, which is a real tight little package, which would look as similar to that. I mean, what you're seeing on that stand back there is literally the smallest anamorphic package in the world. There's no other way to get a true anamorphic look any less weight, I would say, than that. That is probably barely 5 pounds of total weight, and you're shooting true anamorphic in any aspect ratio. So we've got some really cool stuff. Thanks, Morgan. So we've got all that. So what it comes down to is the next step is the hardest step. Because when we're doing tests, whether it's a test or if it's an actual production, it's really hard to share this stuff. Because actually what Dan did, which is not normal of a test, is we rolled like 5, 6, 7 minute takes. So this would be a nightmare to share, because now we have these really long takes and we need to get other people to see them. So we'd be downloading for the rest of the afternoon, possibly, because we probably rolled somewhere near 1 terabyte of footage, probably at least half a terabyte of footage, just standing here going over that stuff. And me and my team at a company called Strada, we feel that this is a problem, because the more we shoot, the more we need to share, the harder it becomes. And so this is a really exciting opportunity, because what I'm going to demonstrate, we just released last Thursday, so it's very new. And when we were getting ready to release it, I couldn't even demo it. We called Dan and his team and we said, we have something coming right after Cinegear. We'd love to be able to show it, because we think it's very practical to be able to take tests and be able to get them to your collaborators that are not here. So what we are really going to demonstrate here, and Jay, I hope we can get the card out of that at some point, because I've never tried that. I want to try it. And if this works, it will be pretty profound because that's been rolling for like an hour, so that's great. But we want you to be able to connect any drive and share it remotely. That's all we want. It sounds really easy, right? Connect any drive and just share it. And then wouldn't that be great if you didn't have to upload it or download it or make a copy or ship it or drive it? Like just connect it and share it. And that's
Bro really said, why do we need a hard drive? Let's make it an easy drive.
Oh, there we go. That's right. We need an easy drive. This is an easy drive. I like it. I might use that. Another way that we describe this is to become your own cloud. Because what is a cloud? A cloud is your files on someone else's drives. Well, why can't it be your hard drive? If you've already invested in the hard drive and you've already invested in the storage and you took the time to store the media, why do you then have to make another pass and upload all that to a cloud so someone else can see it? See, we've been conditioned by cloud companies to instinctively believe that we have to upload to a cloud in order to share an asset remotely. Right? That's how we believe. But what if there was a way that we didn't have to do that? See, I think the cloud storage problem looks like this. Your Dropbox is full. Your iCloud's full. Your Frame.io's full. Your Google Drive is full. Like Dan was asking questions, raise your hands. How many of you got one of these in the last week or so, right? Now think about this as a creative. This is never going to stop. It only stops if you stop making things. And the whole point is to keep making new stuff. So if you make new stuff and you shoot new stuff and you put it in a cloud, then the cloud companies, they got you hooked in the cheek, right? Because you have to keep adding another terabyte, another terabyte, another terabyte, another user, another collaborator. They've got us. We're kind of screwed. Because we can't, unless we just stopped creating new content. Or the scary word that nobody likes is you have to delete. And we all hate deleting. Or you're saying, I can't have a person be part of our team because I can't afford more collaborators on this product, you know, so I have to boot someone off the island to bring in someone new. That's not great either for collaboration. So we want to change this. And one of the things that we learned is that, you know, your camera files are really big. Like these cameras here, both of these cameras shoot around 1 terabyte an hour. So you shoot, the average shoot day shoots about 2.5 hours a day. That's pretty average. So you're talking 2.5 terabytes of footage a day. In fact, the Blackmagic company, they released recently a 17K 65mm camera, which is amazing because it's actually affordable. But that camera shoots 2.5 terabytes an hour. So if you're shooting a normal day, a 10 to 15 terabyte day is actually possible. Now, that's something you got to like really prepare for, but it's now possible. That makes this a big problem. Camera files are too big. But the other problem is your internet's too slow. Most internet service providers will favor download over upload, right? And so you have a faster download, but you have a slow upload. And if you want to upload to a cloud, it takes so much longer to upload that you have a problem there. And if you have 1 terabyte of footage, well, that's really, really going to take a long time. The average internet upload speed in North America is 30 megabits per second. You might be lucky and have one of those gigabit networks, but you're lucky. The average is 30. So at 30 megabits per second, and you have to upload 1 terabyte. My brother will come back with the math any second, but it's going to be slow. 7.5 hours. There you go. So that's per terabyte. That's a big problem, right? But let's just say you're one of those people that had gigabit internet. Sounds like you two both have like good internet. You're lucky. So let's just say, okay, your internet's fast, but the cloud's still too expensive. The average price of a cloud is 40 times more expensive than a hard drive. So storing 1 terabyte on a hard drive or storing it in the cloud is 40 times the price. And remember, if you think about real estate, everyone knows it is cheaper to buy a house and pay it off for 30 years than to rent a house for 30 years, right? A cloud, because you have no equity when you rent. A cloud, you can't buy cloud storage. You just rent it. And you rent it forever and ever and ever. And that's the way these companies are designed to work. And so that's not really good for creative people because we don't want to rent more cloud storage. We want to own the storage. And when you buy a drive, that's yours. And you can buy it and it'll last 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 years. Some of us have hard drives that are 10 years old, right? So that investment is an asset. But when it comes to cloud, there are no assets in cloud because you can only rent it. So these are big problems with the cloud. The other problem with the cloud because of that is you can only afford to put a small slice of your files in the cloud. So think about it. I'm willing to bet that of all the media you've ever shot, all the media that you have, only about 10% of it is stored in a cloud. And about 90% of the footage that you have probably lives on a hard drive. Does that sound familiar? 90% is probably on a hard drive, and about 10% might be shareable in a cloud. Well, what would happen if all of that 90% was available to everyone, and you never had to put it in a cloud at all, and you never had to upload it at all? That would be something really great, because if you're collaborating, if you're sharing, if you need to review, if you're across an ocean or you're dealing with your friends in Spain, you know, it's really far away, and this becomes a big problem, and we want to solve that problem. We built a technology we call Strada. Strada is Italian for street, and we think of workflows as a journey from point A to point B. And so we have people able to download this technology we released about a week ago, and you install a little application we call an agent. And the agent lives in the top of your computer, and that's the little Strada logo up there at the top. And this little agent allows you to see any drive that's connected to your computer. So you can connect a big drive, a small drive, even an SD card from the FX2. And then you just check the boxes for whatever drive you want to turn into a cloud. And if you click the box, that drive in 1 second turns into a cloud shareable drive. No uploading, it's already on the drive, right? And you just instantly have it. Then you can log in to a web browser, we recommend Chrome, and you can access that drive anywhere. And because it's in Chrome, someone could be anywhere in the world and they could access the files right on your drive immediately. And so I want to demonstrate that. And to demonstrate that, we are going to invite our friend Clyde here. So hopefully Clyde could hear me. This will be kind of interesting. And we're going to see if Clyde can join us. So Clyde, hopefully Clyde could hear me. There he is. I think he's coming. Hey, Clyde. There he is. Nice to see you, Clyde.
Hello, Wednesday. Can you see me?
We can. We can indeed.
Yes.
Clyde is an amazing director, cinematographer, gaffer, and because he's like 7'2", he's also a human jib. So if you need all of those things, it's an incredible talent that this guy is capable of doing. He's also not here, and so in this experiment, we are going to have Clyde play the part of a remote collaborator. So that could be a director. Sometimes when you do lens tests, the ACs do it and the DP can't come in. Other times the DP's here, the director's not, or even hair and makeup, wardrobe. These are other production design. They need to see the lens test. They want to understand a little bit about that. And so the problem instantly becomes, how do we get all this footage in these tests for someone to make a decision quickly? Sure, we could download this all day. We could make proxies all night, and we could upload it tomorrow. That's fine. And if you do that today, that makes sense. But what if Clyde needs to see it right now so that we can make a decision on our work immediately? Right? So I want to show you how we can start doing that. What I'm going to do first is I am going to show, I want to take the card out. Can you give me the card? Oh, thank you so much. This is, that's right.
By the way, this is a problem that we actually experience at Wednesday Lens Day, which is people want to take home their footage, but they don't want to download the card. So we want to figure out how to make it much easier for people who are here in person but want to take their footage home, or people who want to tune into Wednesday Lens Day remotely and get access to dailies or tests and look at that library of tests. So this is really a great application for people who want to do lens tests.
Yeah, I used to work at Panavision, and it was always a problem with a production coming in doing a lens test, and they're not going to let you take the card home because you're like, well, this is you're not really a customer, you're just doing a test, and we can't afford to give you the card. So what do you do? Well, we're going to show you how. So I want to be clear. This is the card that just came out of the red, and we shot, 20 or so minutes of footage. And so I am going to plug that into my laptop here. And as soon as that's going to mount on my laptop, you'll see the card mount in, 5 or 10 seconds. There it is. So there's the red card, okay? The red card is called A11O21, okay? So remember, the first thing I have to do is I have to turn it into a cloud. So remember, I click on the Strada agent application, and I see right here, there is A11O21. And because I did a test ahead of time, it's already served as a cloud. This is served as a cloud because I've got the checkbox enable. So now I'm going to go into my Strada account in Chrome, and I see this I see that drive right here, and I can instantly see all the files that Dan shot in this, but I want Clyde to see them. So I'm going to click the invite button on that drive. Can you see a little invite button? And I'm going to add Clyde, and I'm going to see Clyde. Is it Clyde at originpoint.io?
That's right.
Point.io. So I'm going to invite Clyde to this drive right now. And now I'd like to invite Clyde to share his screen, and we're going to show the experience in real time of Clyde getting access to the files. It'll start with an email invitation because Strada will automatically send him an email that he's been invited to this drive. How are we doing, Clyde?
Doing good. About to share my screen. Okay. Cool. This is my inbox. I just got the email from Strada here. Michael has shared a folder with you. Check it out, A11. I'm going to go ahead and click on this. Can everyone see this okay?
Yep.
All right. And so I'm here inside the Strada Agents menu. I see I've got A11 here on the left from Mr. Cioni. I'm going to click on that. Okay. Navigating into the folder here. Let's see what's on A14.
Let's go back. I think that was a test clip. Let's go. You were right. Let's go to the very last clip. We'll just start with the last clip here. And we can see he's going to start playing it back. Clyde is now playing back the file.
Yes, yes.
And we can see that happening from my laptop with the card connected. Do we understand what's happening here? It's a small miracle if you are following
You're not
along.
using any kind of a device or any kind of upload cube or anything, Michael. This is just straight out a card in the computer, basically.
This is the card on the computer, and all these other files. I don't know if you can zoom in or hit Apple Plus to make those a little bigger, but all those other files are the actual raw file. So one thing I love about not Arri cameras. This is a problem with Arri, but with Red cameras, Blackmagic cameras, and Sony cameras, and Canon, is they allow you to shoot a raw file and a proxy at the same time. Team Arri has still not figured out this is very important to workflow. So Arri is a single channel device that records just one file at a time. How boring. But the other cameras can shoot raw plus a proxy. So what you're seeing here is if Clyde grabs a clip, he is able to see all the raw files, but he can see the proxy too, because the proxy will play back easily because it's a self-contained QuickTime movie, right? And then he can quickly grab that, play it back, and we can see Morgan's close-up here. And I think Clyde's trying to do a download. So if you click in the upper right, you'll see here there is the ability to download. So he's actually able to start a transfer, and he can move the proxy if he needed a local copy in the background. So that's running in the background of my computer here. And he's able to do both the viewing it and downloading it, right? So this is an option for people that need to do a download. So cancel that for now, Clyde. We won't have you download this yet. But I'd like you to just go through and demonstrate going through some of the other takes and other folders. And these were real long takes, So just grab another take here. And that one was really short. Let's find one more long one. It's going to be random there. Oh, that one will be good. Yeah. And so what's cool is when Clyde starts playing it, if he skips towards the middle, if you watch his play button, he could skip towards the middle and it'll just skip there and it doesn't have to buffer because there's no cloud. You know, when you skip in a cloud, it has to like buffer for a few seconds. With here, you can see how quickly it will switch from whatever frame it's on to whatever frame it's going to. So how's the playback for you working, Clyde?
I feel like a man stepping on the moon here. We're trying some new technology here. This is awesome. You didn't have to upload this. You didn't have to transfer it anywhere. It's just reading it straight from the card. This feels really good.
I love that because you're also feeding it back to us. So any stuttering we're seeing is probably the zoom being fed back to us and we're resharing Clyde's screen. But do the files appear smooth on your end?
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, it's playing back no problem on my side.
Awesome. So the idea here is that a director or a producer or anyone off-site can see the files really quickly and start making adjustments, or they can have a conversation about what is being shot and what is being discussed. And we don't have to pay the time penalty to do a download, a transcode, an upload, and a share, because all this testing would be done. If Clyde wanted to give us a specific instruction, we could do it right now, right? And we could keep learning and keep exploring the process. So this literally is a total game changer. But I want to do something else, Clyde. So if you would stop sharing your screen, I want to show something that Dan actually mentioned, and we're going to share another one to you, Clyde. I will share it ahead of time to you and then explain it in a moment. Actually, you're already on it. So you have the MM1, right, Clyde?
That's right.
Okay. So I want to show something really cool that Blackmagic has put in. And so Dan and I are aligned that Blackmagic is adding something to the cinema landscape that almost no one else is. Red has like a toe in it, but it's a little cumbersome. But Blackmagic has built something really revolutionary, and they're the furthest along that we've been able to see. They're putting full-size Ethernet ports in their cameras, and they allow you to mount the camera either over wireless. So I don't know if you can see, I'm kind of blocking it, but there's two wireless antennas on the camera, or a full-size Ethernet, which I would use if I could, because Ethernet is going to be a hard line. It's going to be more stable, right? But check this out. If I go to the Finder level and I hit this button, Apple K, this is how you can connect your computer to what's called an SMB mount. This is a type of network connectable soft mounted drive. And so I have the URSA connected to my computer over Ethernet. And that means I have entire access to the drive. This is the drive in the camera. And remember, every other camera, you're going to have to take the card out and put it in a reader to mount it on your computer. But not with Blackmagic. You can literally mount the card of the camera on your computer while it's rolling, which means you can offload the camera without removing the card.
What's crazy is Clyde and I actually used this. We were shooting a piece for PhotoChem to celebrate their Lifetime Achievement Award as a company for the HPA. So they won the Lifetime Achievement for the HPA last year, and we were filming in PhotoChem with the 12K LF Ursa Cine while we were shooting a take, because we were doing these very long interviews. While we were shooting a take, we were able to actually download the take from the previous take while we're shooting, because we didn't want to be there on the camera truck or even in PhotoChem, which is a beautiful place to be late at night. We wanted to get home, like we all do at the end of the day.
Yeah. It's a total breakthrough. So, in fact, I can even demonstrate it here. So I'm going to hit record on the camera, and we actually see Dan right here. And we'll do a rack to Morgan, and then we'll come back to Dan. And watch how quick this is. Clyde, you share your screen. We'll go back to Clyde here.
It's been here. It happened so fast. It was already there.
But it's right there. So if you hit download, you could download the clip. Why don't we just do that? So he could download that clip. It'll negotiate for a second, and it'll start coming down and start pulling the file down. So he's downloading the file directly from the camera. Think about that. Clyde is literally downloading a file at his house from what's inside the camera. So that's sort of the technology that we're unlocking here as well. Is the FX2 still rolling?
Yeah, let's give it a cut.
Let's give it a try. because I actually like to see if it works in vertical, in portrait, and see what happens, because I've never tried to play a file like that.
One of the neat things about the Sony FX cameras is that they do have a gyro that will detect the orientation of the camera. So if I'm correct, it should come in already in the correct rotation when we bring it in.
Okay, this will be fun. So we've got an SD card from an FX2, which I think was, is it even out yet?
It's not shipping, it's only just announced.
This is really, really cool. It's brand new. Yeah, very much so. Okay, so we're going to let that mount. There it is right there. So there's the card. So remember, I go to Strada. I see the FX2 card right here called Untitled. I make a checkbox there, so the card has been shared. Now I'm going to go into my Strada account here because I need to see the Untitled drive. There it is, and I'm going to invite. Actually, I could skip which. This is one thing I don't love that Sony does. Entitled. This is one thing I wish Sony didn't do. All this nonsense.
Entitled drives.
There we go. So if we go to clip, I can just share this directory with Clyde. So I'll go to Clyde at originpoint.io. So we'll send Clyde another invitation, but I've decided just to invite him to the clip. So I've skipped all those other folders because you can invite people to specific directories. It doesn't have to be the entire hard drive. If it's a camera card, you might as well give them the whole card. But if it was a hard drive that had other people's projects, you could just go to a specific folder and say, just invite me to this one folder. So I've done that and invited Clyde to just the clip. So Clyde, we're looking at your screen again, and let's see if you hit refresh. Oh, you got to go to your email and accept the invitation.
I clicked accept in the email and it populated right in here. I see the clip folder and I'm gonna click on my Atlas Scope 90 clip. I'm gonna hit play down here. Here we go. I've got audio coming through and I'm able to go through the clip seamlessly here. No problem. This is really nice. That's what you guys look like out there.
Isn't that wild?
Fantastic. Fantastic.
So if you hit the F key, F for Frank, it'll go full screen.
Yep. Is that showing on your side?
Yeah. Yeah. So now we're seeing a full screen result of this playing back, which is funny because we've basically taken the card, looped it all the way to Clyde's house and back to my laptop. So it's kind of weird. But that's a Strada.
He's right in front of the camera. Nice.
No, that's me down there. Oh, no, that's someone else. And we know, I don't know who he is, but he's got good internet. So that's all I know about him.
Yeah, no, this is fantastic, Michael. This is seriously incredible. The efficiencies that this is opening up for our workflow, it's incredible.
Well, that's awesome to hear that. And where's Jay with Sony? Did he disappear? Oh, he's out. Well,
a lot of Sony things, so if you have a question for him, I can.
Well, I think what's cool is like this is one of the first times I've ever seen an FX2 file before. Not to mention we've got it in the say it again.
We took it from the cloud to the streets, the Super Mario Brothers pipeline.
That's right, the Super Mario Brothers pipeline. Strada Mario Brothers. That's right. But this is really cool. So now Clyde has access. If you look at your timeline on the bottom, I think it says it's well over an hour long. It's something like, you can see, I can see the 59 there. So this is what's really powerful about this is like, it doesn't matter how long the clip is, but when you're dealing with the cloud, it always matters how long a clip is. Like that's like the whole barrier of cloud acquisition and cloud usage. How long, how big, how many gigabytes, how many terabytes. With this Strada technology, it really is irrelevant. It doesn't really matter at all how long something is. You can share it. Now, if Clyde were to download this file, then he would be limited by how much bandwidth we have to transfer the file. But what I believe is a lot of decisions can be made without having to transfer it. If you can see a file, then you can start making decisions. You might not require a local copy. But I think, Clyde, you did download that one file in the background, no?
I did, yeah. Let me go ahead and share my screen again. on Resolve. One second. I was able to download that clip and open it up right here. There's our guy.
So he pulled that file off the camera card directly and now load it in Resolve. So when you think about how you're going to start to move and gravitate towards an edit workflow, this is the foundational ingredients to make that possible, right? And I think Blackmagic is doing an exceptional job of unlocking this because they have SMB Connection. They have that ability to tap into the camera remotely. I know this sounds a little crazy, but an editor could connect to a camera. Not a DIT, sure a DIT can, but an editor can. And the editor can pull that stuff off. So when you're doing fast turnarounds of things like interviews that are long and you don't want to deal with all that stuff, or a producer or a story editor needs to start understanding, well, what did you shoot? Who did you record? What did they say? This can literally happen in the background. I want to also try one more thing. While we're watching, go back to Strada, Clyde, and while Clyde, and play back one of the takes off the Blackmagic camera, I want to demonstrate one more thing. So he goes to, that's the MM1, is the Blackmagic. If he goes to the Blackmagic, finds a long clip, so he'll start playing one of these takes, and we'll see that one's pretty long. So that one's going. While he's playing back, we can roll a new shot. So if we start rolling a take, it's not going to affect Clyde's ability to be watching or downloading. There's enough bandwidth through the camera that it will just throttle the transfer on Clyde's side to keep up with any recording. So this doesn't, I mean, I don't know this. We've just been doing some early tests, but it doesn't seem to affect the camera that we're connected to it and we're using it remotely. So if I'm wrong, find that out and tell us. But I haven't found it to break. This is the camera I have, and it's not breaking. So Clyde's able to, you know, play the files, and we're able to record at the same time. So that's a really it's a really flexible way to use these Blackmagic cameras. Now look, I love all these cameras. I mean, certainly I was making fun of Arri for not having proxy record, which I will continue to do, but they make a great camera and everyone loves their products and there's nothing wrong with the image you get out of it. And the same thing with Red and Sony and Blackmagic. They're all exceptional. But for me, I used to own a post house called Light Iron. I used to work for Panavision. For me, I believe that workflow can really change how projects are made. And I find that when you have a poor workflow, you have to spend more time and money to like bulldoze the product to get through. I actually think people that have efficient workflows end up delivering better projects. I think things go better. You certainly get a little bit more sleep. You have fewer fights with your spouse, right? Like when a workflow goes well, you end up having a smoother ride. And that's why I think it pays to understand workflow. I know a lot of filmmakers that will often say, workflow's not my problem. It's not my job. I don't care. My job is this. And I was like, I think that's cheap. I think we all have a responsibility to try to enhance workflow because you need to have that empathy for the other departments because what you do on a production affects other people. And when people only look at their job in a silo, then they don't care about how it was received or how they send it, the thing starts to break down. And you might be punishing someone you didn't intend to actually punish when your workflows aren't as good as they could be. And so these are things that have always driven me as an innovator. And what you're seeing here is a technology where Clyde, it doesn't matter where Clyde is, he is able to participate, which is going to allow us to make quicker decisions in the moment so we can just move on to the next problem and start solving that one. And we don't have to bother anybody in the meantime to do that. So we are so fresh in this technology. We need people to try it. It's literally 7 days old. We released it last Thursday. So we don't know where it breaks. We don't know where it breaks down. We don't know. We have people all over the world. Yesterday we tried it live on YouTube, and a guy asked if he could participate, and we found out after I invited him to a drive, he was in Vietnam. And it was like midnight in Vietnam, and he was playing back files from my computer in Vietnam. So we know it can go across the Pacific Ocean. So we need to keep trying that and testing it and seeing how it goes. And you can see Clyde's able to access it, and we want to know what we need to do to make it better. And so when people are doing lens tests, this is an exceptionally stressful time where people are trying to make quick decisions fast because you're in pre-production, and pre-production is its own storm. Production is a different storm, but you know, pre-production is its own F4 tornado, right? And so this should really help with that. Any other thoughts, Clyde, that come to mind, or you could see a use case for this in your world?
Oh my gosh, tons. I feel very spoiled right now. If I were a producer or a remote director who wasn't able to make it to set for whatever reason, being able to give real-time feedback and comments on footage like this, being able to download the proxies or the RAWs and being able to work with them with our editor totally just unlocks the creative process. There's no more waiting. Waiting is really time wasted, you know? So any opportunity to find efficiencies like this is just incredible. And this is budget efficiencies, this is time efficiencies, this is unlocking different types of workflows. You know, no more going up to Dropbox, going up to Frame, going up to these different cloud servers, G Drive, you name it. I'm reading off the card. We are the cloud, Michael. We're the cloud right now.
We're the cloud.
Yes, this is cool. Thank you. Thank you for doing this. Thank you, Dan, for everything that you're both doing here. This is incredible. I'm excited to be here helping to test this with you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah. Yeah. Very good. Thanks, Clyde.
Thank you.
And any questions that we're getting? Yeah. No, that's fine. So the question is like, what is the cost? Well, you're going to like this. Everything you just saw, is that right, Pete? Is that everything we just demonstrated is free and will remain free? Everything you just saw is free. Yeah. It's a bad business plan, but that's our, everything we just showed is free. And what that means is you install the agent, you can connect unlimited drives, you can invite unlimited people. The reason that is because, see, when you're dealing with the cloud, do you remember that scene in The Matrix where Morpheus is telling Neo, do you think that's air you're breathing? There aren't rules here like gravity, right? Because, see, the problem is the cloud has rules that you have to follow. But once you remove yourself from the cloud, those rules go away. So, for example, what I'm doing right here is I'm using my processing to do this in code, right? When you use a cloud, you use their processing. So you have to pay for it. But it's your computer. When I'm transferring the file, we're using Dan's internet. When you use a cloud, you're using their networks. You have to pay for it. But Dan's already paying for that. I'm already paying for the laptop. And when you're using storage, whether it is a camera card or a hard drive, that's your storage. You've already paid for it. But when you use a cloud, it's their storage. So in cloud, the cloud rules their storage, their compute, their network. So you pay for all those. What we just did with Clyde was effectively free because it's your computer, your network, and your hard drive. So Strada doesn't get a cut of that, okay? So the agent is free, the invites are free, and the drives you can connect are free. Where we hope to make money is as your workflows get more complex, we will add features that you will pay for that go beyond what you just saw. But we want people to become believers that you can connect a drive, invite people, and you can play it back on the moon. And we want people to realize there's no burden to try that. And if it works, then you can use that. And my guess is you'll probably want additional complex elements to your workflow and that you'll be willing to pay for that. Does that make sense?
And the thing to remember too is that the computer has to stay on, right? So you know, that's like, the power is in your hands. So if you unplug the drive, he's not going to be shared. So that's sort of the caveat, but it's important.
Yeah, you have to keep your computer on. Now, if you're responsible for many terabytes of footage, that computer should always be on, and it's probably living on a desk at home. You don't make your laptop. Some people do, but you don't have to connect the laptop to 200 terabytes of storage. That's usually going to live in a permanent space. So those drives are traditionally accessible. I think.
But it's great in an ad hoc style where you're like, hey, you know, editor, I've got to show you this, or director, I've got to show you this. And that's how we work in the movies. We're here to there. Oftentimes it's not permanent. So the impermanence and the ability to have the power in your hands, I think, is a really beautiful and interesting and exciting thing, because I'm excited to see what people do with it.
And I also think what's cool about this is it's almost like you can now airdrop from Mac to Windows and you don't have to be anywhere near each other, which isn't a technology anybody really has right now. And so it makes it really easy to collaborate cross-platform this way, right?
Doesn't need the agent.
Clyde doesn't need the agent. The agent only has to exist if you're serving media, if you are the cloud source. But a recipient can be anywhere. They just need Chrome and they get the invite. You saw he clicked on the website, just the email, and that delivers. So our plan is what you just saw is free, everything we just demonstrated. And then what will happen is if you want to add private comments, you can start making comments on clips. You're going to pay $15 for that. If you want to transfer to others, what that means is a push. What Clyde did is a pull. So a pull is we invited Clyde, he downloaded the files himself. That's a pull, that's free. If you want to push, that's going to be paid. So imagine a DIT on set renders a whole bunch of dailies. They could push the files card by card. They could push them to the editor, and that would be a paid upgrade. Otherwise, you have to get the editor to pull from the DIT's cart. But as Dan said, if the DIT's cart goes offline, the editor can't do that. So a push is a little bit more of an advanced workflow, and that's publishing. So it's a little different.
I mean, that's really neat. That's super useful because it allows you to jettison your footage to your own drive later or to wherever, right?
Yeah,
So you're like,
when you know it's ready.
yeah, that's good for backup.
Yep. And then we're creating a share link. So what we did to demonstrate with Clyde is we invited him to these drives. But if you wanted to just share one file out in just a single URL, no invitation to drives, no mounting drives, just a web page that's a player, that's an external share. We call that a share link. And so that will be a paid upgrade. So if you're using this in a team, you don't need a lot of share links because you're going to invite people to your drives. But if you have customers and clients, you want to share out to them, that's different. So we assume you're getting paid more to have a client, so we're going to charge you for that feature. And then no limit on browser transfers. So you could keep stacking up larger and larger batches of huge amounts of files. Like if you needed to back up multiple terabytes, thousands and thousands of files, you're probably getting paid to do that. You'd use that. And then we'll have additional add-ons like synchronous review. So if you want to have a viewing of an asset, let's say you do a rough cut of a film, but you're all distributed. If you wanted to do a synchronous session where you're all watching the same asset at the same time, you can invite your collaborators and you can watch it all together. And there's a microphone, so it's like a Zoom call, except you're not sharing your screen. Everybody's seeing it locally. It looks really good. And then we'll be adding AI transcriptions so that you can transcribe all your material. This is great for the nonfiction and for interviews because Strada will automatically get the file and transcribe it instantly, which will be great. And then bulk purchase for small teams. If you just want to do like bulk licenses, we'll have, programs like that and stuff like that. So we want to make this very affordable. We want to make this very approachable. It's new, it's different. Dan made a good point. If you are your own cloud, you're now responsible as your own cloud. So there's some responsibility with this. When you put things in Google Cloud or AWS, you just trust them to keep it up all the time. You pay a lot for that. When it's on you, you're going to save a ton of money. This is going to be way less, like 900% cheaper, but you got to keep it on. If you look at the agent at the top, it will show all of my personal local file system. So this is like my applications folder, my desktop, right? So I may want to share with me my own stuff. So I could log into my computer remotely and just have everything accessible. That's just for me. I wouldn't share my desktop out to anyone else, right? But I could have it available to me. So that's where it becomes more personal and professional crossover. Yeah, so Windows is coming hopefully July 1st. So very soon, not Linux yet. If Windows goes well and we work out issues with that, then we'll move on to Linux. Thanks all, that was fun.
Thank you.